The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of NAMI New Hampshire or the organization's funders. All individuals and personal experiences are different. Please connect with your primary care provider or a mental health professional to seek advice regarding any condition you may experience. NAMI New Hampshire does not endorse or advise specific treatments. For 24/7 crisis help, contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or text NAMI to the crisis text line at 741-741 or call 911.
It's time we talked about it. I'm getting tired of living without it. The things in my life just don't make any sense. Each day I wake in the morning, but every day just feels so boring. I don't understand just what I need to change. It's up to you to want to do the things you want to do. And though it's temporary, feeling sad can be so scary. I love the ones who understand me. I never want to feel so angry. I never want to feel like this again.
Welcome to the 603 Stories Podcast, a monthly mental health podcast made by young adults for young adults, where we share stories, make connections, and find hope. Any ads throughout this podcast are not associated with 603 Stories or the 603 Stories Podcast. There will be sensitive subjects discussed during this podcast. Should you need them, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255, or you can text the crisis text line by texting 741-741.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 603 Stories Podcast, a mental health podcast made by young adults for young adults. I'm Jace. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'll be one of your hosts for this episode.
Hi there, I'm Heather. My pronouns are she, they, and I'll be your other co-host. Before we dive into our topic of how legislation impacts our mental health, I would just like to remind all of our listeners that Jace and I are not mental health professionals. We're simply two young adults who are passionate about mental health and enjoy sharing these important discussions with you.
We would also just like to remind everyone today that, like mental illness and suicide, NAMI New Hampshire is nonpartisan. We support policies that help people with mental health conditions and their families, and collaborate with diverse stakeholders on shared goals to improve the lives of individuals affected by mental illness and suicide. So, with that being said, let's jump right in and meet our guest for today's episode. Welcome, Sam. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. My name's Sam Hawkins. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the public policy assistant here at NAMI New Hampshire. In my personal time, I'm a writer, a dad to a very nervous German Shepherd, and overall happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. So what is your personal investment with mental illness? Why does this profession speak to you?
I think it really derives from, I'm a massive believer in community, the power of community, that we really we become strong mentally and as people by supporting each other, lifting each other up, and keeping each other safe and healthy. I think this is a great avenue to do that.
Awesome. Was there anything specific that made you become interested in public policy?
I've always been politically active and oriented, but like others, and I think a lot of other young adults, I sort of struggled knowing how I could engage other than, the presidential election, the midterms, and things like that. But like I mentioned earlier, I've always sort of been moved by community organizations. So I tried for a long time to figure out how to bridge those ideas, how to engage more myself and get others to engage more, which brought me to grassroots advocacy. It's been a bit of a terrifying leap, and after being in it for a little bit, it is intimidating, but it's more accessible than I thought it would be. The only real prerequisite to getting involved is caring about people and being able to read a bill. So
Nice. And bills could definitely be daunting to read sometimes. I've taken a look at some of them every once in a while. and they're long and very detailed. So props to you for doing that and being able to do the groundwork for folks that kind of struggle with dissecting those bills and being able to advocate for those policies.
It's a lot of reading and rereading and rereading.
Also, thank you for just making this seem a lot less terrifying. I'm definitely one of the people who gets super overwhelmed as soon as anything really political related comes up on my news feed, or obviously all the like pop-up notifications that my silly little phone sends me. So hearing that there isn't really a prerequisite just makes it seem more approachable.
It's a lot of small bites,
And also just knowing that there are other young adults out there that are taking on policy right now is really comforting, because a lot of times it seems like a lot of older folks that are the ones in legislation and are the ones making all the decisions. But knowing that there are young adults kind of being the boots on the ground and looking out for other young adults is really meaningful.
Absolutely agree.
What would you say are some ways young folks or people in general can advocate for their stances on bills when testifying in person may not be the safest thing for their well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much you can do to make a difference, even if you can't go into the State House or the Legislative Office building to testify. You can go and register your opinion on any bill on the General Court website that goes into the public record. All goes there. You can call your representatives, send them emails, start a petition, write a letter to the editor if you don't want to contact your representatives. But really, any action is better than no action, right? If you know someone else is going to testify and you want to drive them because parking is a challenge for them, or they don't have a car and you drive them to the State House, that's a help. If they're at the State House all day and you bring them lunch and hand it off to them outside, that's a help too. Yeah, anything helps.
What would you say like the best way to contact legislators is? Because you mentioned like calling them or emailing them, but I think I've heard that a lot of them have assistants, and sometimes it's hard to like actually get through to the legislator themselves. So what would be the most effective course of action in that case?
Calling is definitely more effective at getting your foot in the door. They get so many emails, and I mean, I'm sure they want to get back to as many as they can, but they get buried. So calling, if you reach their assistant, leave a message. That's a much more effective way of getting to them. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. But it's nice that we have those options where you can call or you can email or you can write a letter as well, because I know for me personally, sometimes picking up the phone and calling can be a little anxiety inducing. But also once I do it once, then it's a lot less intimidating. So just gotta practice, keep practicing.
In the same way, I type in the phone number and then I have to I automatic press the button before I even let myself think about it. And then I'm just in the situation, I have to deal with it.
There you go. That's one way to do it. So Sam, why does pending legislation have such an emotional impact on the mental health of young adults in our state? What do you think is causing that emotional response?
Yeah, it's a massive question. I have a massive answer, but I'm gonna try and break it down into pieces and work through it. I mean, the first most obvious factor, right, is that some of these bills directly affect our quality of life. They affect what we can do in our lives, and that carries a ton of weight. Beyond that immediate impact, though, and especially for young adults, looking at these bills can feel like we're looking at the landscape of our futures. They determine what we can achieve, where we're going to live, where we want to maybe build a family, if we want to build a family. And we can look at, where things are going. We can extrapolate where these trends are going. And that can be really scary and sort of sap our motivation of wanting to be involved in the future. It can be really exhausting. And in general, the legislative process can feel pretty distant and confusing. I think Heather was getting at this earlier. You see these headlines of lawmakers passed this bill And you're like, what does that mean? Is that law now? What is a committee recommendation? If it passes in the House, does that mean it's immediately state law? All of the uncertainty and all of that can make the process feel kind of threatening, or at least just very scary.
Can you clarify a little bit on what the standard steps are
Yeah,
for having something actually become a law?
yes, I would love to do the brief process. So a representative or a senator files a bill. That bill gets referred to a committee, which is just a smaller group of either House representatives or state senators. They'll have a hearing, a public hearing, where members of the public can come in, speak to the bill. They'll listen, ask questions, and then the committees come together. They discuss the bill, and then they determine what recommendation they're going to give to the full Senate or the full House, the two bodies in the state, and then the full House, the full Senate come together. They hear the committee's recommendation, and they all vote on whether they want to pass that bill or not pass the bill. If they pass the bill, it'll cross over to the other body. So if it was in the Senate, it'll go to the House, vice versa. The same process will happen. If the second body passes it, it'll go to the governor, and then the governor can either sign into law or veto it.
That's so interesting, because I feel like so often in my mind when I hear that it was passed by like the Senate, I'll be like, it's a law now. But I guess I didn't realize that it went from one side to the other. So if it started in the Senate, it'll go to the House after that, and vice versa. I thought it was kind of more like they write the bill, it goes to the Senate, and then it goes up to the governor. But I'm glad that I have that clarification now.
Same, I had the same exact confusion. That's what makes all those headlines seem really urgent, but the process is a lot longer, and there's a lot of time to intervene.
I have to go back and watch my Schoolhouse Rock videos again.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, did I miss something in Schoolhouse Rock?
Is it different state to state?
Probably.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna say, I don't know. Yeah. No pressure. This is 603 Stories. We're focused on New Hampshire.
So if you were going to speak in person for a hearing, is that the correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you wanted to go speak in person and share testimony, is that something you would need to like sign up for in advance, or is there any formal process, or can you just kind of show up ready to share?
Yeah, you can just show up. It's one of those things, again, that's really sort of surprisingly and intimidatingly easy. You go onto the website, you look at the committee meeting schedule, you see what room they're meeting in. You go in when the hearing's happening. In the House, you fill out a little pink card and you'll hand it to a representative. In the Senate, you'll sign up your name on a white sheet of paper by the front of the room. And then after the prime sponsor, so the senator or the House representative who filed the bill introduces it, the chairman of the committee will just go through the list, calling people up, and you'll go up and you'll speak. You'll get questions. You don't have to answer any questions if you don't want to, and then that'll be that. It's surprisingly easy.
Is there like a time limit for people that testify? I would imagine there would have to be.
Yeah, it's about 3 minutes. 3 minutes is the standard. If there aren't very many people signed up to testify for a bill, they sometimes won't really hold people to a time limit, but if they have a lot of speakers, they'll be pretty strict on the 3 minutes. So I would make sure you have your comments within that time limit.
Nice. Good information to have.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we need to go back to the beginning of the podcast and say, hey, this is 603 Stories, where we learn how a bill becomes a law.
Yeah.
Schoolhouse Rock who?
I can't sing, so don't expect me to sing this one.
Well, I guess we can still have you on. So are there any bills that you've seen recently that you'd say have generated a emotional response either for yourself or, just kind of across the board in the public?
So many. I'll give two examples. I'll start with a positive example. one that's really impacted me personally in hearings that I've attended is for Senate Bill 263, which is the current bill extending New Hampshire's Medicaid expansion program. In those hearings, I've gotten to listen to such like emotional, touching stories that show how incredibly important that program is and how many people it's provided for. And the people that have come to those hearings are incredibly brave, and that just outpouring of support for that program has really shown like the gravity of that social support that we can offer. So got that positive example for, I mean, obviously some of the most contentious and emotional bills we've had this session have been the numerous discriminatory bills targeting the LGBTQ plus community, which we're seeing these trends, you know, both locally and nationally. At the State House, those are really long, hard days. A lot of amazing people, just individuals coming out to testify in opposition to those bills, defending themselves, defending their loved ones. It's really sad that they have to do that, obviously, and that has a huge impact on mental health. I mean, of course it does. You're getting this message from other members of your state, those elected to represent you, that they don't accept you, and that's obviously about as heavy as it can get. And some of the things said at those hearings can be really tough. The impact of that is pretty profound. And something really like important for the mental health for that issue too is just the exhaustion involved, because it's not like these bills come up once and we defeat them once. They come up once and then it's like a hydra. You defeat one, two more come back. So I think both for advocates and the people that the bills are targeting, there's this question of when is it going to stop, and that absolutely has an impact on mental health.
I would absolutely say that is such a huge part of the like paralysis that I get when trying to look at public policy, or any really trying to approach news about what's going on in our government, because as a queer person, a lot of these things directly impact me, can impact my life, can impact some of the really incredible folks that I work with and the young people that I love, especially.
Which I think also loops back to what you were saying before as to why it impacts young adults specifically. Obviously, the LGBTQ community is a broad community, and there are people of all ages within that community. But as like a young queer person, I have to decide whether I want to start a family or if this is somewhere where I want to live, just like you were saying before. And watching how these bills play out and the opinions that lawmakers and like officials in our state have about my existence even is draining. And so not even like talking about going and advocating yet and how that can be extremely draining as well, but just existing in a state of this uncertainty is also really tiring for a lot of people. So with that being said, do you have any, I guess, recommendations or advice on how we can support those people who are being impacted by some of these laws or heavier / discriminatory bills? Yeah, that support is crucial because as we've gotten at, this is a marathon. Not sure quite what the length of that marathon is yet, but it is a marathon. Long. You know, if people impacted by this are going to testify to, if they are advocating, making that process as frictionless for them as possible. Organize with them, help them edit their testimony, rehearse their testimony, reduce as many of those barriers as possible, and go with them as a support if you can. I think especially for allies who are not directly targeted by the bills as well, but do have loved ones who are targeted by or even just recognize the discrimination in those bills, go testify. You don't have to be directly impacted to testify on the bill. Stand with the people impacted by them on these issues instead of leaving them alone to fight it. Just one thing specific to in the courtroom, you know, I think sometimes in these hearings, in lawmakings, there can be this like abstraction
the individual that can feel really dehumanizing. Like advocates, representatives, everyone will bring their they'll bring their data points, their statistics, their political strategies, which are all done to help, of course. But we can end up talking about the individuals impacted by the bills instead of talking to the individuals impacted by the bills. And that's something we as advocates trying to support those impacted by these bills need to be really cognizant of, is to center the individual in their story, lift them up and support them rather than just talking about them, avoiding that sort of paternalism. And then lastly, I would say to support them, just focus on the successes as well, celebrate good bills passing. So far, there's a bill right now that has really good traction that would prohibit the LGBTQ plus panic defense in New Hampshire, which is fantastic. And beyond the State House, provide positive, supportive, celebratory spaces. Just get away from the negativity. We don't only need to organize around negativity. We can organize around positivity.
Sorry, I guess for the first time, I guess maybe not so surprised, but realizing that the panic defense was not prohibited previously, I am overjoyed to hear that we are in the process of making very clearly necessary movements on that.
Yeah, I think it's just us in Massachusetts left in New England that haven't prohibited it yet. I think, but we would be joining like 16 other territories that have at this point, so that'd be great.
And Sam, if we could just backtrack for the listeners real quick, would you mind giving a little bit of detail on what the gay panic defense law is?
Yes. So the gay panic defense would basically be if someone murdered an LGBTQ plus person as part of their defense. It can't be their sole defense, but as part of their defense, they could plead that they were provoked to violence by the other person's gender identity, sexual orientation, and that just the existence of that factor of their person provoked them to violence, which isn't law. It's common law, but we need to prohibit it.
Yeah, and I would also add, correct me if I'm wrong, that it frequently exists around the conversation of someone feeling like they were deceived. Yes,
absolutely. So some examples would be like, you go out with someone and then not without having it disclosed to you up front, and then it comes out later and you've quote unquote feel deceived and then feel pushed to violence.
I have followed this law very closely and monitored it very closely, especially as a trans man in the dating world. It's a scary reality, and again, that goes back to how heavy it can be living in a state and like having these laws that are kind of like hovering over you, and just make you feel a little bit less safe, but knowing that there are people out there like you, Sam, who are working on these bills and working on creating a safer community for all of us, is really heartwarming. And I just wanted to thank you again. I know we've probably thanked you like 5 times, but I'm going to do it again.
I'm even more grateful to be able to be part of the process. So just a small part of the process.
Every drop in the bucket counts, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, celebrating the wins is a huge part of finding balance. Other than celebrating the wins, would you have any advice for folks trying to create balance with staying informed and also needing to take space for self-care and their own well-being?
Yeah, like this is super important for me too. Looking at it all every day. And I would say, like, while I deeply think everyone needs to stay informed, there's a difference between staying informed and just doom scrolling, which I end up doing a lot. what's helped me is making checking the news a conscious and controlled activity. So sit down, I'll say, okay, I'm going to look at the news. I'm going to look at it for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then I'm done looking at the news for this morning, today, whatever it ends up being. And then you make that boundary with yourself and you maintain that boundary, whether that takes blocking keywords on social media, setting time limits on apps, or even making the spaces where you catch up on your news like entirely separate from social media. Maybe get your news from centralized like newsletters that bring all of that together. You get it from one place. Just keeping that as a separate space from your recreational activities.
Okay, so part two to my question, and this is also a two-part question. Are there any ways that you could recommend for setting boundaries? Like are there certain ways on your phone or on social media to kind of block certain content like that or filter it? And second part of my question, are there any sources you would recommend folks to go to keep in touch in a more healthy way?
I know Twitter, you can block keywords so that they won't come up on your feed. That's very helpful. I think most social media platforms have that option. Apple allows you to set time limits for any app. So if you have your, I don't know, whatever news source you like, whatever app that is, set a time limit, stick to it. Don't click the little OK button that lets you delay the time limiter. And as for resources, you can go to the NAMI New Hampshire e-newsletter. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know, that the where to go all sort of comes down to taste, I think. But I'm sure if you find an organization you like, an organization that follows the issues that are important to you, chances are they have a newsletter that you can sign up for.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to put this into explain how Twitter works to me.
No.
But thank you. I appreciate it.
But it's definitely helpful to know, because I didn't know that you could filter out certain things, which I think would be really helpful at times, because although I want to stay informed, I definitely do struggle with that balance of wanting to stay informed and doom scrolling at the same time and just kind of ruminating on all of these things. But it is important that we stay informed because it's happening right here in our own backyard, kind of thing, you know? And the only way to kind of advocate and be a voice for change is to make sure that you know what's going on so that you're able to kind of stand up and do those things. So I think it's important that we have these conversations, especially for folks like me that are not always the best with technology, which as a young adult, I hear is not quite common. So
Absolutely. And sometimes / very frequently, you just want to scroll and look at pictures of cats and funny Reddit stories without being bombarded with super controversial things that can directly impact your life. So
Yeah, and you can use it for anything. One of my friends blocked all of the keywords having to do with Succession, so they wouldn't get any spoilers for the new season while they catch up. So there you go.
there you go. There you go. All about balance. Maybe if you are going to doom scroll for a little while, just hang out with the German Shepherd that you mentioned while you do it, so that you got a little bit of positive energy going on while you also have this overwhelming energy.
He helps.
There you go. So Sam, why do you think young adults should be active participants in their legislation? Not just scrolling and reading about these things, but actually getting down to the State House or making those calls or sending letters, writing those letters to the editor, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's where so much of our energy as a community is. You know, that's where so much of our real progress is going to come from. You know, being involved is where that real progress is going to come from. And in these hearings, you know, more than statistics or anything that we, you know, advocacy groups can bring, what really impacts legislators is the personal stories from their constituents, from people from their districts. That's what really gets to them, hearing from their people. And young adults make up a massive portion of the population. But if we don't get involved, then it becomes more likely that the policies that do get enacted won't represent our needs, our wants, and as a consequence, won't really be representative of a massive portion of the state. And I understand why a lot of people don't get involved. I think we young adults really struggle with not feeling taken seriously in politics. And I do think, there's some good reason for that. I think there's a tendency to sort of dismiss us in politics. But if we make sure that the seats we do have at the table are filled and they're consistently filled, and we stay passionate, we stay informed, and we stay vocal, I think eventually that'll change.
And I love what you said about statistics versus real people and real stories. It's so easy to talk about statistics and take out that humanity behind them, but by putting those people in front of our legislators and making it a real story and being able to put that face to the name and to the statistics, it really just drives the point home as to yeah, we are real people and we deserve good things, So
yeah, telling your representative, I voted for you, I voted you into this role, and this bill is impacting me, and you're there to represent me as an individual, and really framing your appeal that way.
that's powerful. Not that I never thought about that, because obviously our representatives represent us, but sitting down with someone and saying, I voted for you and you are my voice here, please represent it well. Wow, that just really hit me. So Sam, I know we mentioned SB 263 at the beginning as one of the recent wins or positive things that you're going through right now with your work. But I was wondering if you would be able to share a couple of other recent wins that have made you feel proud of the work you do. And that doesn't necessarily mean bills that have completely passed, but we talked about being a drop in the bucket. And what are some of those moments that really made you feel like the work you're doing is profound, not just for yourself, but maybe for the community as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm even struggling myself a little bit with the question, full honesty, just because it is so easy to focus on the hard days, and those drops sometimes seem bigger. But like I said before, the gay panic defense bill moving forward, or the bill prohibiting that moving forward, is so far making great progress, is very exciting. And every anti-LGBTQ plus bill that we've heard so far, except for one, is no longer moving forward this session. Those are massive wins. Those feel great. Getting together the visibilities beforehand, seeing individuals come out to those hearings, listening to them speak and their stories, looking at them being proud to come together in spite of sort of the challenge of why they're there. That's really powerful.
Are there any specific moments in the near or distant past that really solidified for you why you're doing what you're doing?
I was going to say what you said before, where it's easier to focus on the hard days than it is to focus on the easy days, is so real. And I think that's so relatable to mental health in general. It can feel so hard to have that feeling of making progress when you're just focusing on the things that are going wrong. But when you look at years in the past and see where you are now versus where you were years ago, it's so much easier to see all of the progress you made. But that day-to-day work, like you said, can be so difficult to kind of appreciate the progress that you're making, because it is baby steps most of the time, but every single one of those steps goes towards building a better future. And it's hard to appreciate it in the moment, but looking back, I am always so grateful for every single step that we have made.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think something that's big for me that keeps me going in the work is doing it because I can do it, and therefore I have to do it. You know what I mean? sitting in those rooms and listening to the single parent who took a day off of work and brought their kids and sat in the hearing room for 3 hours to get their chance to speak, to get their 3 minutes to speak, realizing if they can sacrifice so much to be there for 3 minutes and speak, absolutely, I can do it as a job and sit there and do that work.
Makes me want to cry. Yeah, and you're so right. And the people that do sacrifice so much to be there and stand up and advocate are true superheroes, true rock stars. And if we can do anything to support them, then that is a job well done.
100%.
Thank you so much. Now I know we're nearing the end of our conversation. So before we close things out, if there was one thing you would want our listeners to walk away with today, what would you say that is?
The message that like you don't have to do any of this alone, and not only that you don't have to, you shouldn't do any of this alone. Reconcile with yourself, know your wants, your needs, your concerns for your future in whatever state you're in, and then go to your neighbors, go to your other community members, find out what their needs, wants, and concerns are, see where you overlap, find organizations that are doing the work, and then organize, come together, fight for the change, and carry that burden together communally, not as an individual.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
And
So
thank you guys. You guys, the work you guys do also is incredible. Reaching out to so many people, that makes a big change too.
we're all working on raising those young adult voices in our own ways. So hopefully we can get some of our listeners on your end and some of your folks can come speak to us.
Great.
So a couple of takeaways, I guess, before we close out for tonight. Heather, do you want to start?
I mean, I just want to start with thank you. I am genuinely moved by what you have to share. I think especially lately where it does feel like we're moving backwards a bit. Hearing not only some positives and kind of being grounded in reality, a bit more about the process of how a bill becomes a law. But hearing you highlight not only the importance of community and why we should be coming together, but the people that you do see in real life with your own eyes that are doing that work just gives me a lot of good feelings. And I'd say like biggest takeaways right now are more just emotional ones than a specific statement, but just kind of taking a moment to feel some gratitude for the incredible folks, especially young people who aren't well represented in our government. It just is becoming more and more clear how important that is.
I think one of my biggest takeaways from the conversation is that you don't necessarily need to be the person, I guess, on the stand and making a passionate speech in order to affect change in these laws. It could be as simple as driving someone to the state house, like you said, Sam, or bringing them lunch, or picking them up after they're done, or being there to lean on after they have put themselves out there. And that's really powerful because I know that it can be nerve-wracking for a lot of people to do something so bold as to stand up in front of lawmakers. But there are ways to kind of build up to it and get a foot in the door before you actually go up and start testifying right away. So there's small things you can do to kind of build up to that large scale change. But the other thing that really hit me from this conversation was being a face for those statistics that those lawmakers are talking about, because like we said, it can be so easy to just talk about the statistics, but until you meet someone or have that face-to-face interaction, it doesn't always feel real. And as someone who can work with statistics all day long in my own job, it's really important that we are meeting these people and having these conversations and really connecting with other community members, because we are the ones that make up the community, and we are the ones that make up these statistics that laws are being passed about. And unless we get to know one another and support one another, we may not make the right choices when passing these laws. And we want to be sure that we're making the right choices. So really building that community and understanding is really, really important. So thank you for all the work that you do again.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. Everything you both said hit the nail on the head. That's why we do what we do.
Indeed. So one last thank you, Sam, for joining us today. Your insight was very eye-opening and empowering. And we appreciate everything that you shared today with us. And we wish you good luck with your future legislative efforts as we go forward.
Thank you.
As always, thank you to our listeners. Your engagement with this podcast gives us the ability to continue sharing stories like these from our community. And if you like today's episode, consider sharing it on social media. And if you're interested in more 603 Stories content, visit us at 603stories.org or on Instagram by searching at 603 Stories.
Thanks for listening to the 603 Stories Podcast, a monthly podcast made by young adults for young adults. You can check out 603 Stories on Facebook or Instagram, or at our website, 603stories.org. Just a reminder, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline can be reached at 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-TALK. And the crisis text line can be reached by texting to 741-741. Remember, you can make connections, get help, and find hope through 603 Stories.